Hello, I'm Alex Brown, and I'd like to introduce you to the Spanning Pour Stop for Steel Deck Institute design tool. This tool allows you to check various sizes of regular or stiffened light gauge pour stop for spanning between structural deck supports, where it's going to behave more similar to a beam. Let's jump in. First thing you may notice is that this tool is actually a lot simpler than some of our other design tools, which can get kind of gnarly. There's only a couple of inputs up here defining the deck and the concrete, and then there's just the one table here for the resulting pour stop sizes. And the reason for that is that this tool is meant for kind of a specialized use of pour stop. Traditionally, light gauge pour stop is supposed to be continuously supported. So in this type of a scenario where it's sitting on top of a joist like this, and then going, perpendicular to what we see on the screen here, some sort of supplemental framing would be required sitting on top of that beam in order to make sure that this has something to bear on the entire length that it's going to hold up that edge of slab. But in certain scenarios, you may want to avoid that supplemental framing, or it may not be possible. The pour stop itself has some capacity to clear span from support to support, and that's what this tool takes into account. So based on the required span and required overhang length that it needs to achieve to get that edge of slab or edge of steel dimension, that's going to translate into different sizes of pour stop and whether it requires stiffeners or not. So that's all communicated here. If we scroll down a little bit, I want to point out footnote number 4, which takes you to the Steel Deck Institute technical note number 3, pour stops as beams, because that's really how this pour stop is acting, is as a beam spanning from support to support. And this is a free download on the SDI website, and you can get all of the detailed calculations from that document. But then scrolling down a little bit further, we've got these expanded tables here that show for unstiffened or stiffened pour stop what the minimum and maximum allowable widths need to be, and then their corresponding allowable spans or allowable overhangs. So let's go ahead and get into an example here. We'll leave it as a composite deck, though I'll point out that this tool supports non-composite deck or roof deck if you happen to be using those for your concrete deck slab. And then for the deck profile, it defaults to the 1.5" VL. It's worth taking a moment to go through some of these different abbreviations here, the nomenclature that Vulcraft uses. So VL is pretty standard for a composite trapezoidal deck profile shape. And then there's different variations on that. So the I is for an interlocking side lap for screwed connections. The J is for an interlocking side lap for welded connections, side lap connections. R is going to be a reversed profile, so it's actually flipping the deck profile upside down. Gives it a little bit different concrete distribution, some different structural capacities. The PL stands for punch lock, which is another side lap option. And then the 36 is the width of the deck sheet itself, so 36 inches wide or 3 feet. And if we look at this pour stop attachment detail here, that's going to be the dimension from left to right. One sheet of deck would be 36 inches wide. So we'll change this from the 1.5" to 3 VLI 36. And you can see I'm getting an error message here because my total slab depth is still at the 3.5 inches it defaulted to, which is not thick enough to adequately work compositely on a 3-inch deep deck. We'll change that to 5 inches. And then with that, it starts giving me some results here for bottom flat width. So you can see I get kind of a range depending on what gauge pour stop I'm using. So 3 inches to 8 inches for 10 gauge unstiffened. Or I can use a lighter 12 gauge, but it can only be 6 inches wide with the bottom flat width. Or if I have stiffeners present, I can get it down to maybe a 14 gauge pour stop. And again, these expanded tables down here are going to give me a little bit more information to just see what the allowable capacities are of that pour stop in this condition. And that's the Spanning Pour Stop per SDI design tool. It's a great tool for getting visibility on a non-traditional use of light gauge pour stop, both unstiffened or stiffened. And with that, happy specifying.